Michael Thompson, a 34-year-old software engineer from Portland, Oregon, disappeared on September 15, 2014, while on a solo hiking expedition in the wilderness surrounding Ketchikan, Alaska. Thompson had arrived in the southeastern Alaskan town 5 days earlier, as part of what he described to family members as a personal retreat to disconnect from technology and experience the region's untamed natural environment. According to his sister, Jennifer Thompson Martinez, Michael had been planning the Alaska trip for over 8 months. He was going through a difficult period after his divorce was finalized in March, she told investigators. Michael said he needed time to think and reset his priorities. He'd always talked about visiting Alaska, and this seemed like the right moment. Thompson had recently completed a major project at his software development company and had accumulated several weeks of vacation time. Flight records showed Thompson departed Portland International Airport on September 10, 2014, arriving in Ketchikan that evening via Seattle. He checked into the Grand Aleutian Hotel on Tongass Avenue, booking a single room for 6 nights. Hotel manager Patricia Williams later recalled Thompson as a polite guest who kept to himself. "He seemed like any other tourist at first," Williams said in her statement to police. "He asked about hiking trails and wilderness areas. Nothing unusual about that in Ketchikan." During his first 3 days in town, Thompson visited several local outfitters and spoke with guides about backcountry hiking options. At Southeast Exposure, an outdoor gear shop on Potter Street, employee Mark Rodriguez remembered selling Thompson a detailed topographic map of the area surrounding Ward Lake and additional camping supplies. He said he had experience with wilderness camping, Rodriguez told investigators. He knew what equipment he needed and asked good questions about weather patterns and trail conditions. Thompson's phone records indicate he called his sister on September 12th and spoke with his ex-wife Sarah Thompson on September 13th. Both conversations were described by the recipients as routine check-ins. Michael sounded relaxed and excited about his hiking plans, Jennifer told police. He mentioned wanting to find some remote areas where he could camp for a few days without seeing other people. That was typical for him. He always preferred solitude when he was stressed. On September 14th, Thompson visited the Ketchikan Visitors Bureau and spoke with information specialist Carol Jensen about accessing less traveled trails in the Tongass National Forest. Jensen's notes from that day indicate Thompson was particularly interested in areas accessible from Ward Lake Road, but beyond the typical tourist routes. He wanted somewhere he could hike in for several miles and set up camp away from the main trails, Jensen recalled. "I gave him information about the backcountry camping regulations and emphasized the importance of filing a proper itinerary. However, investigators later determined that Thompson never filed an official backcountry itinerary with the U.S. Forest Service, as recommended by Jensen. This omission would later complicate search efforts when Thompson failed to return as planned. According to his hotel reservation, Thompson had intended to check out on September 16th and fly back to Portland that evening. Security camera footage from the hotel shows Thompson leaving the Grand Aleutian at approximately 7:30 a.m. on September 15th, carrying a large backpack and wearing hiking boots, dark pants, and a red rain jacket. Hotel records indicate he had settled his bill the previous evening and left his checkout status as flexible, telling front desk clerk Michael Davis he might return earlier than planned depending on weather conditions. The last confirmed sighting of Thompson came from Frank Morrison, a local resident who was driving north on Ward Lake Road around 8:15 a.m. on September 15th. Morrison later told investigators he saw a man matching Thompson's description walking along the roadside carrying a backpack. "I remember because tourists don't usually head out that early, especially not alone," Morrison said. "I thought about offering him a ride, but he seemed to know where he was going." Thompson's family became concerned when he failed to answer phone calls on September 16th. His sister attempted to reach him multiple times throughout the day, eventually contacting the Grand Aleutian Hotel that evening. When hotel staff confirmed Thompson had not returned and had missed his scheduled checkout time, Jennifer contacted the Ketchikan Police Department to report her brother as a missing person. The initial police response was handled by Officer James Chen, who took the missing person report over the phone from Jennifer Thompson Martinez. "At first, we treated it as a routine case of a hiker who might have extended his trip or encountered minor delays," Chen later explained. It's not uncommon for people to lose track of time in the wilderness or change their plans without informing family immediately. However, when Thompson failed to appear for his scheduled flight on September 16th and his rental car remained in the hotel parking lot, the situation escalated. Ketchikan Police Detective Lisa Park was assigned to the case on September 17th. Park's initial investigation focused on retracing Thompson's known movements and interviewing local businesses where he had been seen. Detective Park's report noted that Thompson had withdrawn $400 in cash from an ATM near the hotel on September 14th, his last recorded financial transaction. His credit cards showed no activity after September 13th, when he purchased supplies at Southeast Exposure. Cell phone records indicated Thompson's device last connected to a tower near Ward Lake at 9:23 a.m. on September 15th, suggesting he had traveled several miles from the road by that time. Park also discovered that Thompson had researched Ketchikan and its surrounding wilderness extensively before his trip. His internet browser history, obtained through a search warrant of his Portland apartment, showed visits to hiking websites, weather forecasting services, and forums discussing remote camping spots in Southeast Alaska. He clearly put significant planning into this trip, Park noted in her report. This wasn't an impulsive decision. The investigation revealed Thompson had told different people slightly different versions of his hiking plans. To his sister, he mentioned wanting to camp for a few days in a remote area. To the hotel clerk, he suggested he might return early depending on weather. To the outdoor gear shop employee, he indicated interest in a multi-day backcountry experience. This inconsistency would later prove problematic for search teams trying to determine Thompson's intended route and timeline. Weather records show that conditions during Thompson's disappearance were generally favorable, with partly cloudy skies and temperatures in the mid-50s Fahrenheit. However, weather services had forecast a storm system approaching the region for September 17-18, which could have influenced Thompson's decision-making if he was monitoring forecasts. By September 18th, when Thompson had been missing for 3 full days, Detective Park had interviewed more than a dozen local residents and business owners. The investigation uncovered no evidence of foul play, personal conflicts, or financial problems that might explain Thompson's disappearance. His ex-wife confirmed their divorce had been amicable, and his employer verified he was not facing any professional difficulties. Thompson's family arrived in Ketchikan on September 19th to assist with search efforts. His sister Jennifer and his parents, Robert and Martha Thompson from Sacramento, established themselves at the Grand Aleutian Hotel and began coordinating with local authorities. "We just wanted to help however we could," Robert Thompson later said. Michael was an experienced hiker, but Alaska wilderness is different from anything he'd encountered before. The family's presence in Ketchikan brought additional attention to the case. Local media began reporting on the missing tourist, and the story was picked up by Portland news outlets. The Ketchikan Daily News published its first article about Thompson's disappearance on September 20th, including a photograph provided by his family and details about his planned hiking activities. As the first week of Thompson's disappearance concluded, Detective Park had established a timeline of his final known movements, but had not uncovered any concrete leads about what happened after he left Ward Lake Road on the morning of September 15th. The case would soon transition from a missing person investigation to a full-scale wilderness search operation, involving multiple agencies and volunteer groups in what would become one of Ketchikan's most extensive search efforts in recent memory. The first official search for Michael Thompson began at dawn on September 20th, 2014, 5 days after his disappearance. Ketchikan Police Chief Robert Martinez authorized the deployment of the department's search and rescue team after determining that Thompson's absence met the criteria for an active missing person case, requiring immediate field response. Search and Rescue Coordinator David Walsh assembled a team of 12 volunteers from the Ketchikan Volunteer Rescue Squad at 6 a.m. that Saturday morning. According to Walsh's operational report, the initial search focused on the Ward Lake Recreation Area and surrounding Forest Service roads, based on Frank Morrison's sighting of Thompson walking north on Ward Lake Road. "We started with the assumption that he followed one of the established trails from the Ward Lake area," Walsh explained to reporters. "That's where most hikers begin when they're looking for backcountry access." The search team divided into 3 groups, each assigned to different trail systems radiating from Ward Lake. Team Alpha, led by experienced volunteer rescuer Janet Pierce, took the Ward Lake Nature Trail and its connecting paths toward Perseverance Lake. Team Beta, under volunteer coordinator Mike Stevens, searched the Talbot Lake Trail and adjacent unmarked routes. Team Charlie, headed by Walsh himself, investigated the less-traveled paths leading toward the Deer Mountain area. After 8 hours of searching on September 20th, the teams had covered approximately 15 square miles of terrain without finding any trace of Thompson or his equipment. Walsh's report noted that search conditions were challenging due to dense underbrush and recent rainfall that had obscured potential footprints or other signs of passage. The forest floor was saturated from earlier precipitation, Walsh documented. Any tracks Thompson might have left would have been difficult to detect even under ideal circumstances. Thompson's family maintained constant communication with search coordinators throughout the weekend efforts. His sister Jennifer established herself as the primary family contact with authorities, providing updates to other relatives and managing media inquiries. "We were hopeful those first few days," Jennifer later recalled. "Everyone kept telling us that Alaska wilderness can be disorienting, and that experienced hikers sometimes take longer to find their way back to civilization." On September 21st, the search expanded to include Alaska State Troopers and U.S. Coast Guard assets. Coast Guard helicopter crews from Air Station Sitka began aerial reconnaissance of the broader Tongass National Forest area surrounding Ketchikan. Pilot Lieutenant Commander Sarah Phillips conducted the initial aerial survey, focusing on clearings and water features where a lost hiker might establish temporary shelter or signal for help. "From the air, you can see how vast and dense this forest really is," Phillips reported to ground coordinators. "We're looking for any signs of human activity. Smoke from a campfire, bright-colored gear, cleared areas where someone might have set up camp, but the canopy is so thick in most areas that visibility to the ground is severely limited." The Coast Guard flights on September 21st and 22 covered nearly 200 square miles, but yielded no visual evidence of Thompson's presence in the wilderness. Phillips noted in her flight reports that several areas of interest were identified from the air, including what appeared to be man-made clearings and potential camping spots, but ground verification would be necessary to determine if any were connected to Thompson's disappearance. Alaska State Trooper Sergeant Michael Rodriguez arrived in Ketchikan on September 22nd to coordinate state-level resources for the search effort. Rodriguez brought additional personnel and specialized equipment, including thermal imaging devices and advanced GPS mapping tools. "When we have a missing person case in Alaska wilderness, we deploy every available resource," Rodriguez explained to local media. "The terrain and weather conditions don't allow for extended search windows." Rodriguez's team established a formal incident command structure at the Ketchikan Public Safety Building, coordinating activities between local police, volunteer rescue squads, Coast Guard assets, and Forest Service personnel. The incident command system allowed for more systematic coverage of potential search areas and better communication between different agencies involved in the effort. On September 23rd, search dogs from the Alaska Search and Rescue Dogs Association arrived from Anchorage. Handler Mary Chen brought 2 German shepherds trained in wilderness tracking to assist with ground search efforts. The dogs were provided with Thompson's scent from clothing items obtained from his hotel room and began systematic searches of areas where human scent might be detected. The dogs showed some interest in certain locations along the Ward Lake Road area, Chen reported after the first day of canine searches. "But we didn't get any sustained tracking behavior that would indicate a clear scent trail. After 8 days, environmental factors like rain and wind can significantly degrade scent evidence." The search effort attracted significant media attention as it entered its second week. Portland television stations sent reporters to Ketchikan, and the story began appearing in national news outlets. The Thompson family held their first press conference on September 24th at the Ketchikan Visitors Bureau, with Jennifer serving as the primary spokesperson. "Michael is an intelligent, experienced outdoorsman who knows his limitations," Jennifer told reporters. "We believe he encountered some kind of unexpected situation that prevented him from returning as planned. We're asking anyone who might have seen him or has information about his movements to contact authorities immediately." The press conference included a detailed description of Thompson's appearance and the equipment he was carrying. According to the family's information, Thompson was wearing a red rain jacket, dark hiking pants, and brown leather hiking boots. His backpack was described as a large forest green pack with multiple external pockets. The family estimated he was carrying camping equipment for 3 to 4 days, including a tent, sleeping bag, and food supplies. Local media coverage generated several new tips from Ketchikan residents who believed they might have seen Thompson during his stay in town. Detective Park followed up on each reported sighting, but none provided concrete leads about Thompson's activities after September 15th. "We received approximately 20 tips during the week following the press conference," Park documented. "Most were well-intentioned, but ultimately unproductive leads about tourists who resembled the missing person." By September 25th, ground search teams had covered over 40 square miles of wilderness area without finding any evidence of Thompson's presence. Search coordinator Walsh reported that volunteer participation remained strong, with local residents continuing to dedicate weekends to search activities. However, the systematic grid searches had exhausted the most likely areas where Thompson might have traveled from his last known position. "We've thoroughly searched all the established trails and most of the accessible off-trail areas within a reasonable day's hike from Ward Lake," Walsh reported to Incident Command. "If Thompson went further into the backcountry than initially estimated, we're going to need to significantly expand our search radius." The expanded search phase began on September 28th, incorporating areas up to 10 miles from Ward Lake in all directions. This expansion required additional resources and personnel, straining the capabilities of local volunteer organizations. Alaska State Troopers requested assistance from National Guard units, and on September 30th, a National Guard helicopter crew joined the search effort. Captain Jennifer Wong, commanding the National Guard helicopter team, conducted extensive aerial searches of remote areas previously inaccessible to ground teams. "We focused on drainage areas, ridge lines, and natural travel corridors where a hiker might logically move through the terrain," Wong reported. "We also searched areas around remote cabins and structures where someone might seek shelter." The National Guard flights identified several abandoned cabins and structures in the remote areas surrounding Ketchikan, but ground verification of these locations found no evidence of recent human activity. Wong's team photographed potential points of interest for later ground investigation, creating a comprehensive aerial record of the search area. Thompson's employer in Portland, Cascade Software Solutions, offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to his safe return. Company President Thomas Mitchell announced the reward during a Portland press conference on October 2nd, describing Thompson as a valued employee and respected colleague. "Michael is part of our work family," Mitchell said. "We want to do everything possible to support the search efforts and help bring him home safely." The reward announcement generated additional media coverage and prompted several new tips to authorities. However, Detective Park's follow-up investigations of these leads proved similarly unproductive. The reward brought us more attention, but unfortunately not the kind of concrete information we needed to advance the investigation, Park noted in her case files. By early October, search coordinators faced difficult decisions about resource allocation and the scope of continued search efforts. Weather conditions were deteriorating as Southeast Alaska's winter season approached, making helicopter operations more dangerous and ground searches less feasible. The volunteer rescue squads had sustained their efforts for over 2 weeks, but maintaining such intensive search operations indefinitely was not realistic. On October 8th, Incident Command held a comprehensive review meeting to assess the search effort's progress and determine next steps. Representatives from all participating agencies evaluated the areas searched, resources expended, and likelihood of success for continued operations. The meeting's conclusions would determine whether the active search phase would continue or transition to a different investigative approach. Search Coordinator Walsh presented data showing that organized search teams had covered 127 square miles of wilderness area, investigated 43 specific points of interest, and followed up on 37 civilian tips. Coast Guard and National Guard aircraft had logged over 60 flight hours in aerial reconnaissance. Despite these extensive efforts, no physical evidence of Thompson or his equipment had been discovered. The October 8th meeting concluded with a decision to scale back active search operations while maintaining the case as an open missing person investigation. We've exhausted the most promising search areas using available resources, Chief Martinez announced. We're transitioning to a monitoring phase where we'll continue to investigate new leads while preparing for resumed search operations if circumstances warrant. The Thompson family was informed of this decision during a private meeting with Chief Martinez and Detective Park on October 9th. The family expressed understanding of the resource limitations while requesting that authorities remain responsive to any new developments in the case. The transition from active search to cold case status marked the beginning of a different kind of ordeal for the Thompson family. Detective Lisa Park maintained primary responsibility for the investigation, but with no new leads emerging, the case file gradually moved from active daily review to periodic examination. According to Park's records, the case was formally classified as a cold case on January 15, 2015, 4 months after Thompson's disappearance. Jennifer Thompson Martinez relocated temporarily to Ketchikan in November 2014, taking a leave of absence from her teaching position in Portland to coordinate ongoing search efforts. "I couldn't just go home and wait," she explained in a December 2014 interview with the Ketchikan Daily News. "Michael was still out there somewhere, and I felt like someone from the family needed to stay close to the investigation." Jennifer's presence in Ketchikan allowed her to maintain regular contact with local authorities and organize periodic volunteer search efforts. She rented a small apartment on Creek Street and established relationships with several local residents who had participated in the original search operations. Her persistence kept Thompson's case visible in the community during the crucial early months when public attention typically fades from missing person cases. The first anniversary of Thompson's disappearance brought renewed media attention to the case. Portland television stations returned to Ketchikan in September 2015 to produce follow-up stories about the investigation's status. The coverage prompted Alaska state troopers to conduct a case review, examining all evidence collected during the initial investigation for potential leads that might have been overlooked. Sergeant Rodriguez, who had coordinated state resources during the original search, led the anniversary review process. "Cold case reviews are standard procedure in missing person investigations," Rodriguez explained to reporters. "New technology, fresh perspectives, and additional time sometimes reveal information that wasn't apparent during the initial investigation phase." The 2015 review included re-examination of Thompson's digital footprint, focusing on his internet activity, phone records, and financial transactions in the weeks before his disappearance. Investigators also re-interviewed key witnesses, including hotel staff, outdoor gear retailers, and local residents who had reported sightings of Thompson during his stay in Ketchikan. Detective Park's anniversary report documented several minor inconsistencies in witness statements, but found no evidence suggesting foul play or indicating Thompson had deviated significantly from his stated hiking plans. The report concluded that Thompson had most likely encountered some form of accident or medical emergency while hiking alone in remote wilderness areas. The evidence continues to support the theory that this was a wilderness incident rather than a criminal matter, Park wrote in her September 2015 case summary. The challenging terrain, unpredictable weather conditions, and vast search area make it entirely plausible that someone could become lost or injured without leaving discoverable traces. Thompson's parents, Robert and Martha Thompson, established the Michael Thompson Search Fund in 2016 to support continued search efforts and assist other families dealing with missing person cases in wilderness areas. The fund raised approximately $25,000 during its first year, money that was used to hire private investigators and fund additional search operations in areas not thoroughly covered during the initial investigation. Private investigator James Morrison, hired by the family in March 2016, spent 3 months in Ketchikan conducting independent research into Thompson's disappearance. Morrison's approach focused on interviewing local residents who had not been contacted during the original investigation, particularly people living in remote areas who might have observed unusual activity during September 2014. Law enforcement did an excellent job with the initial investigation, but there are always people in small communities who don't come forward immediately, Morrison explained in his report to the Thompson family. Sometimes these individuals have information that seems unimportant to them, but could be significant to investigators. Morrison's interviews uncovered several previously unreported sightings of hikers in the general time frame of Thompson's disappearance, but none could be definitively connected to Thompson himself. His investigation did identify 3 additional abandoned cabins and structures in remote areas that had not been thoroughly searched during the original operation. The Alaska Mountain Rescue Group conducted searches of these locations in July 2016, but found no evidence of recent human habitation or any materials that could be linked to Thompson. The group's report noted that many of these structures showed significant deterioration and would have provided only minimal shelter for someone seeking refuge from weather conditions. Public interest in Thompson's case received periodic boosts from true crime podcasts and missing person websites that featured his story. In 2018, the podcast Vanished in Alaska dedicated a 2-part episode to Thompson's disappearance, interviewing family members, investigators, and search coordinators. The episodes generated hundreds of new tips to authorities, though follow-up investigations found no credible leads. Detective Park, who had been promoted to sergeant by 2018, continued to review Thompson's case file quarterly and investigate any credible tips that emerged. Her case logs show that between 2015 and 2019, the Ketchikan Police Department received over 150 tips related to Thompson's disappearance, ranging from reported sightings to theories about what might have happened to him. The vast majority of tips we received were from well-meaning people who wanted to help, but didn't have factual information relevant to the case, Park documented. We investigated every credible lead thoroughly, but none provided the breakthrough we were hoping for. The case took an emotional toll on the Thompson family, as years passed without resolution. Jennifer returned to Portland in late 2016, but continued to make annual trips to Ketchikan to meet with investigators and organize memorial searches. The family's relationships were strained by the ongoing uncertainty and the different ways family members processed their grief and hope. Some family members wanted to have a memorial service and begin the process of accepting that Michael was gone, Jennifer explained in a 2019 interview. Others, including myself, felt like giving up hope would be abandoning him. It created tension that was difficult for everyone involved. The Thompson case became part of a broader pattern that Alaska law enforcement agencies recognized as a persistent challenge. According to Alaska State Trooper statistics, the state averages approximately 40 missing person cases annually in wilderness areas, with roughly 30% remaining unresolved after 5 years. Lieutenant Colonel James Peterson of the Alaska State Troopers discussed the unique challenges of wilderness missing person cases during a 2020 conference presentation. Alaska's vast wilderness areas and extreme weather conditions create scenarios where people can disappear completely without leaving discoverable evidence, Peterson explained. Traditional search methods have limitations when dealing with such expansive and challenging terrain. New technology developments offered some hope for resolving cold cases like Thompson's. In 2021, the Alaska Department of Public Safety began using advanced satellite imagery analysis to identify potential search areas that might have been missed during ground operations. The technology allowed investigators to examine detailed imagery of remote areas and identify anomalies that might warrant physical investigation. Thompson's case was selected for satellite imagery review in early 2022, nearly 8 years after his disappearance. The analysis covered over 300 square miles surrounding Ketchikan, focusing on areas beyond the original search perimeter. The review identified several locations of interest that appeared to show possible human-made structures or clearings not previously documented. Ground verification of these satellite-identified locations was scheduled for summer 2022, but weather conditions and resource limitations delayed the operations until the following year. The Thompson family was informed about the planned searches and remained cautiously optimistic that new technology might finally provide answers about Michael's fate. Detective Park, now approaching retirement after nearly 3 decades in law enforcement, continued to maintain Thompson's case as one of her priority cold cases. "This case has stayed with me throughout my career," Park said in a 2022 interview. "The Thompson family deserves answers, and I believe those answers are still out there waiting to be discovered." The approaching 10-year anniversary of Thompson's disappearance prompted renewed discussion about the case within the Ketchikan community. Local residents who had participated in the original search efforts reflected on the impact the case had on their small town and the enduring questions about what happened to the Portland software engineer who came to Alaska seeking solitude and adventure. As 2023 began, Thompson's case remained officially open and under active investigation, though the frequency of new developments had decreased significantly since the initial search operations. The case file had grown to include hundreds of pages of reports, witness statements, and investigative notes, creating a comprehensive record of one of Ketchikan's most extensive missing person investigations. The discovery that would finally answer nearly a decade of questions began with a routine timber assessment conducted by Tongass Forest Services contractor Marcus Chen and his survey team on March 12, 2023. Chen's crew was evaluating potential harvesting areas approximately 18 miles northeast of Ketchikan when they encountered an unmapped structure that did not appear in their reference documentation or historical records. According to Chen's incident report filed with the Ketchikan Police Department, the team initially assumed they had located another abandoned hunting shelter, which are commonly found throughout the remote areas of the Tongass National Forest. We encounter old cabins and temporary structures regularly during our forest assessments, Chen explained to investigators. Most of these buildings are decades old and have been empty for years. This particular structure appeared similar from our initial external observation. The cabin was situated in a heavily forested clearing, accessible only by foot or helicopter transport, located approximately 2 miles from the nearest marked trail system. Chen's GPS equipment recorded the structure's position at latitude 55.4 or 127 degrees north, longitude 131, 8934 degrees west, placing it in an area that had not been systematically searched during the 2014 investigation due to its extreme remoteness and challenging terrain access requirements. Chen's survey crew approached the single-room log structure to document its location for their comprehensive forest assessment report. The building appeared weathered, but structurally sound, with a partially deteriorated roof and dense vegetation growth surrounding its foundation. When Chen attempted to examine the interior through a damaged window opening, he observed what appeared to be camping equipment distributed throughout the cabin's single room. I noticed a backpack and what looked like someone's personal camping gear arranged inside the structure, Chen reported to investigators. Initially, I assumed hunters or other outdoor enthusiasts had been using the location recently, but something about the scene seemed unusual. The equipment appeared to have been there for an extended period, and there was no evidence of recent human activity in the surrounding area. Chen made the decision to enter the cabin to properly document its contents for inclusion in his survey report. Inside the structure, he discovered extensive camping equipment, including a large forest green backpack, sleeping bag, portable camping stove, and various personal items scattered throughout the room. More significantly, Chen observed what appeared to be human remains positioned in the corner of the cabin's interior space. Once I realized what I was observing, our team immediately exited the cabin and established a perimeter around the structure, Chen stated in his formal report. None of our crew members disturbed anything inside the cabin beyond what was necessary to confirm what we had discovered. We recorded the precise GPS coordinates and immediately contacted law enforcement authorities. Chen contacted the Ketchikan Police Department at 2:47 p.m. on March 12, 2023, reporting the discovery to communications operator Linda Martinez. The call was immediately transferred to Detective Sergeant Lisa Park, who had maintained primary responsibility for cold case investigations throughout her career, including continued oversight of Michael Thompson's unsolved disappearance. Park's initial response team included Officer David Walsh, crime scene technician Sarah Rodriguez, and evidence photographer Michael Stevens. Due to the remote location and challenging access conditions, the response team required helicopter transportation from the local Coast Guard station to reach the discovery site. Coast Guard helicopter pilot, Chief Petty Officer Jennifer Wong transported the investigation team to the cabin location at approximately 4:30 p.m. on March 12th. Upon arrival at the remote site, Park established a secure perimeter around the cabin structure and began conducting preliminary documentation of the exterior conditions before authorizing entry into the building. Her initial field observations noted that the cabin appeared to have been unoccupied for several years, with significant weather damage and extensive vegetation growth indicating prolonged exposure to environmental conditions. The cabin's overall condition strongly suggested it had remained unoccupied for an extended period, Park documented in her initial crime scene assessment report. However, the camping equipment visible inside the structure appeared to be in relatively good preservation, having been protected from direct weather exposure by the building itself. Park's investigative team spent approximately 4 hours at the scene on March 12th, conducting comprehensive preliminary documentation and initial evidence collection procedures. The human remains were extensively photographed in their original position before being carefully collected and prepared for transport to the Alaska State Medical Examiner's office in Anchorage. The camping equipment and personal items discovered throughout the cabin were individually cataloged, photographed, and secured as potential evidence. Among the significant items recovered from the cabin were a large forest green backpack that matched the description provided by Thompson's family members during the 2014 investigation, a red rain jacket consistent with witness descriptions of Thompson's clothing during his final days in Ketchikan, and camping equipment similar to items Thompson had purchased from Southeast Exposure Outdoor Gear Shop during his stay. Additionally, investigators recovered a water-damaged wallet containing identification documents and a cell phone that appeared to have been inactive for an extended period. Dr. Amanda Foster, Alaska State Medical Examiner, conducted the preliminary examination of the recovered remains on March 15, 2023, at the State Forensic Facility in Anchorage. Her initial professional assessment indicated the remains were consistent with those of an adult male, matching Thompson's age range and general physical characteristics. However, formal identification required additional comprehensive forensic analysis, including dental record comparison and potential DNA testing procedures. The condition of the remains and the specific environmental factors where they were discovered required careful methodical analysis to determine positive identification and establish potential circumstances of death, Dr. Foster explained in her preliminary forensic report. The protected indoor environment had helped preserve some evidence, but natural decomposition processes occurring over nearly 9 years had significantly altered the physical remains. Detective Sergeant Park contacted the Thompson family on March 16, 2023, to inform them of the significant discovery and explain the ongoing identification procedures. Jennifer Thompson Martinez immediately arranged to fly to Ketchikan upon receiving the notification, accompanied by her parents Robert and Martha Thompson. The family met with investigating officers on March 17th to provide additional information that might assist with the comprehensive identification process. After 9 years of constant wondering and maintaining hope, we finally had something concrete to focus on, Jennifer later explained to reporters during a press conference. While it was emotionally devastating to consider that Michael might actually be gone, we also experienced a sense of relief knowing we might finally have definitive answers about what happened to him during those final days. The formal identification process required several weeks of careful analysis due to the condition of the remains and the necessity for comprehensive forensic examination procedures. Thompson's dental records, which had been obtained from his Portland dentist during the initial 2014 investigation, provided the primary means for positive identification. On April 3, 2023, Dr. Foster officially confirmed that the remains discovered in the remote cabin were positively identified as those of Michael Thompson. The confirmation of Thompson's identity prompted an immediate renewed investigation into the specific circumstances surrounding his final days in the Alaska wilderness. Park's investigative team returned to the cabin site on multiple occasions during April 2023, conducting exhaustive searches of the surrounding forest area and carefully examining all evidence found at the scene for additional clues about how Thompson had managed to reach such a remote location. Comprehensive analysis of the camping equipment discovered in the cabin revealed that Thompson had been exceptionally well prepared for extended wilderness camping activities. His pack contained food supplies that forensic analysis indicated would have sustained him for approximately 1 week under normal conditions, along with adequate shelter materials and cooking equipment. A detailed inventory of his gear demonstrated that he had been systematic and thorough in his preparations, packing appropriate equipment for the environmental conditions he expected to encounter. Thompson's recovered cell phone provided crucial information about his activities during his final days in the wilderness. Although the device had suffered significant water damage over the years, forensic technology specialists were able to extract substantial data from its memory storage. The phone's final recorded GPS position indicated Thompson had traveled approximately 12 miles northeast of Ward Lake before the device permanently lost cellular signal coverage. The phone data clearly demonstrated that Thompson had hiked much further into the wilderness than our initial estimates during the 2014 search operations, Park explained to investigators. He had traveled well beyond the areas we had systematically searched during the original investigation, which explains why our extensive search operations at that time were unable to locate him. The phone's internal photo gallery contained numerous images Thompson had captured during his final hiking expedition, providing investigators with a detailed timeline of his movements through the wilderness. The photographs documented Thompson following an unmarked route through extremely dense forest terrain, recording various natural landmarks and wildlife observations along his journey. The final photographs stored on the device were dated September 18, 2014, which was 3 full days after his originally planned return date to Ketchikan. Dr. Foster's comprehensive forensic examination of Thompson's remains, completed in May 2023, determined that the cause of death was most consistent with exposure to harsh environmental conditions over an extended period. The medical examiner found no evidence of physical trauma, indicators of foul play, or other factors that would suggest Thompson's death had resulted from anything other than natural causes directly related to wilderness survival challenges. The available evidence strongly indicates that Thompson survived alone in the wilderness for several days beyond his planned return date, Dr. Foster reported in her official findings. The determined cause of death appears to be directly related to prolonged exposure and the severe physical stresses associated with extended survival attempts in extremely challenging environmental conditions. The comprehensive investigation revealed that Thompson had most likely become disoriented during his solo hiking expedition and had fortunately discovered the abandoned cabin while desperately searching for adequate shelter from deteriorating weather conditions. Physical evidence found at the scene suggested he had utilized the cabin as a temporary base of operations while making repeated attempts to signal for rescue assistance and find navigable routes back toward civilization. However, the extremely remote location and complete lack of communication capabilities had prevented him from successfully making contact with search and rescue services. Park's final comprehensive investigation report, officially released in June 2023, concluded that Thompson's death was entirely accidental and resulted from the inherent risks naturally associated with solo wilderness hiking in Alaska's notoriously challenging terrain. The report specifically noted that Thompson had taken reasonable safety precautions before his expedition and had demonstrated excellent survival skills and decision-making during his final days. But the unfortunate combination of difficult navigation conditions and extremely remote location had ultimately prevented his successful return to safety. The Thompson family organized a memorial service in Portland on June 24, 2023, nearly 9 years after Michael's initial disappearance from Ketchikan. The service was attended by numerous family members, close friends, professional colleagues, and several of the law enforcement personnel who had participated in search efforts over the extended years of investigation. Jennifer delivered an emotional eulogy that specifically thanked the many dedicated people who had contributed to the lengthy search for answers. Michael genuinely loved outdoor adventure and deeply appreciated the natural beauty of wild places throughout his life, Jennifer said during the memorial service. While we naturally wish his Alaska expedition had concluded differently, we are profoundly grateful to finally understand what happened and to be able to properly lay him to rest with the dignity he deserved. The case's resolution brought significant public attention to the serious challenges routinely faced by solo wilderness hikers throughout Alaska and prompted important discussions about improved safety protocols and emergency communication equipment requirements for backcountry travel. The Alaska Department of Fish and Game subsequently updated its official hiking safety guidelines to place greater emphasis on the critical importance of detailed itinerary planning and reliable emergency communication devices for all solo hikers. Detective Sergeant Park, who officially retired from the Ketchikan Police Department in August 2023, reflected thoughtfully on the case's long-awaited resolution during her department retirement ceremony. The Thompson case effectively represents both the significant challenges and the unwavering persistence that truly define professional police work, Park said during her farewell address. Sometimes definitive answers require years to emerge, but our fundamental commitment to finding those answers never diminishes over time. The remote abandoned cabin where Thompson spent his final days was deliberately left undisturbed as an appropriate mark of respect for his memory. The Tongass Land Development Corporation voluntarily modified their proposed logging plans to permanently preserve the historic site, and the Forest Service subsequently placed a small, respectful memorial marker near the location. The cabin remains accessible only to highly experienced hikers and serves as a somber reminder of the unpredictable and potentially dangerous nature of Alaska's vast wilderness areas. Thompson's case was officially closed on September 15, 2023, exactly 9 years to the day after his mysterious disappearance from Ketchikan. The extensive case file, containing hundreds of pages of detailed investigation reports, witness statements, forensic analysis, and physical evidence documentation, was permanently archived as a completed investigation. The case had involved dozens of dedicated law enforcement personnel, hundreds of community volunteers, and thousands of documented hours of search efforts spanning nearly a complete decade. The final resolution of Michael Thompson's disappearance provided much-needed closure for his grieving family and the entire Ketchikan community that had maintained hope for his safe return throughout the long years of painful uncertainty. While the ultimate ending was certainly not what anyone had hoped for during those difficult years, the discovery finally provided definitive answers to the questions that had persisted since that fateful September day in 2014, when a Portland software engineer ventured alone into Alaska's vast wilderness, seeking personal solitude and inadvertently finding his final resting place in a remote cabin hidden deep within the endless Tongass National Forest.